Welcome back to Magna Meets. The first word that comes to mind when their names are mentioned is respected. In this episode, we have a humble individual who has carved his name in the world of business, but has done so with his lifelong friend. They've transformed their vision into a reality, building an enviable client base, an impeccable reputation, and a brand that resonates with success. What makes this duo even more intriguing is their friendship, which goes back to the age of 11. The question of whether to enter the business world together, given their close bond, will surely reveal some insightful perspectives. From striking lucrative deals to savouring the fruits of their labour, we'll explore how they transition from single lets and HMOs into the complex world of property development, discovering if the journey is as challenging as it sounds. How do they see opportunities where others might not? Their ability to thrive in a competitive field, staying profitable where others falter, has surely been guided by a set of principles. We'll uncover these strategies, along with their favourite aspects of the development process and the exciting partnerships that have propelled their success. Finally, we'll break down the intricacies of numbers in the development world, making this episode a must-see. Malkit, welcome to the podcast.
Hey John, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And I had two words for Sanjay, but he's unable to join us, which was, Sanjay, come on. I was expecting him to sort of launch some merchandise over the course of the next few years, but
It's only a matter of time.
yeah, it is. It's coming. I can see it happening. But he's meeting lenders today, isn't he?
That's
so
right.
He's unable to join us. But appreciate you taking the time out to come and see us. Look, if your journey had a recipe, what would be the ingredients for you, Malkit?
I would say consistency, hard work, the family aspect, and never giving up.
And for you, give us a little insight in terms of your background, what it is you do with Savoys Properties.
Okay, yeah, so my background, I'm a computer software developer, analyst, and my background actually started back in 2001. We had basically lastminute.com floated on the market, and 9/11 happened, and I was working at that time at my first corporate job. I actually saw like grown men being fired, made redundant, and they were like, oh, what am I going to do about paying my mortgages and my car loans and so on? I'm like, okay, wow, I thought this was what I was supposed to do, get qualified in terms of the degree, get a full-time job, work for a reputable company, and this is how you sort of get financially free. And it was at that point then it sort of hit me that I need some sort of side hustle. What ended up happening was I went out for a weekend after this with Sanjay. We went out, and he used to live quite nearby. He came back home to drop him off in the cab, and he said, why don't you come in for a drink? And I did. He ended up going straight up and went to bed, but his dad was in the living room, and I ended up just having a beer and talking to him. And he told me at that time, he goes, look, buy-to-let mortgages are out. Up until sort of late 90s, if you were going to buy a secondary home, you'd have to take a commercial loan, and the interest rates were higher, and it was a little bit more difficult. Following I believe when Tony Blair came into power in 97 onwards, buy-to-let mortgages came out, and the rates were quite similar to residential loans, and it was a lot more accessible. You didn't have all the scrutiny that you do at the moment. So, he fueled me with this, and I went home, and at that time, there was no Rightmove, there was no Zoopla. I used to have a couple of papers, the Gazette and the Leader, so I flicked in there. In the middle, used to have a home section. So I went to have a look at some properties. I'm like, okay, wow, look, there's this property here. It's at 80K guide, and it's local to us. I'm like, oh, that's really cheap. Normally, these properties are around 140, 160K. I looked into it a little bit more. I remember researching it a little, not knowing too much. I spoke to my dad about this. I went with him to auction. I purchased this property. We ended up obtaining it for £120,000. I called 3 agents down, and they valued it between 150 to 160. I then ended up refinancing this at 85%. I basically pulled all my funds back out. I'm like, okay, wow. So within 12 months, we ended up purchasing 3 properties that year. And that's basically how we sort of started, and I can go into it a little bit more. But
conception.
Yeah. So that was basically it. It was just basically understanding that you can't leave your destiny in someone else's hands. You actually need to sort of take ownership and looking out there, the ones that are financially free is via ownership. And that was sort of then my goal while I was still in the corporate life.
What I realise is over the episodes, there seems to be a recurring theme, which is a lot of successful businesses are born out of crisis. So, you realise at that point, there was instability. You can't leave your destiny in someone else's hand. That's number one. Number two is 2001. It's now 2023. And, the journey has been a long one for you, clearly. It's not like it's been an overnight success.
No, it's been a very long journey, but this is where, when we initially discussed, it was the consistency, the hard work. Like, both myself and Sanjay were still working full-time jobs. I was actually I only quit my job 5 years ago.
Okay.
I was working in the city, so not too far from where we are today.
It's actually not that far off. It's quite recent.
Yeah, so what we actually did was work out a way where I could work a full-time job, because the salary was actually pretty good. Whatever I put into my pension, they'll double. So it was just amazing. So, and you had obviously free healthcare and everything that comes with a city job. So I actually quite liked doing that, and we were balancing it. We were making money in the property stuff. Got a corporate career, so it was nice. But it was when I ended up having my son, and then about childcare and where I actually lived, it wasn't easy enough to finish at 5 and get back and do pick up before 6, because then that's when the nursery closes. So it was quite difficult. So something sort of had to give. And that's when we went full-time into, okay, look, we're just going to really go hard in property. We're going hard anyway. We're going to go harder. And whatever the number of projects that we were doing in a year, we were going to triple that. And that's how that element happened. But yeah, and Sanjay was also working in his full-time in his family business, which they still have. His brother now looks after that. But he also wanted to focus down this route, because if you do something that you love, it sort of becomes your passion, and you want to just pursue that element of it.
When you stopped, when you actually made that transition from your day jobs into property, did you realise how much you'd left off the table?
With hindsight, I wish I sort of did this earlier, because I quit my job, was it 28th of November 2017, and from quitting my job, that in January I completed one project, and I made, basically, when me and Sanjay split our profit share, I made my whole salary in that 1 month. I'm like, okay, well, now I'm fine. So obviously that was the refinance money that came. I'm like, well, I basically made what I was going to make for that year. Now it's okay. So your mindset is more stable, like, okay, we can just do this. So we're just doing bigger and more projects.
Was it the fact that there was the element of risk, not knowing that if you jumped into it, what would happen?
Yeah, well, it's also down to your partner. So my wife was always saying, well, why don't if you can carry on doing 2, why don't you do 2? And literally, I used to get up at sort of 6:30 in the morning. I'll be at work for 8 o'clock in the city. I'd come back home. I'll do a little bit of work in between hours, or maybe some during work. But then after, in the evening, I'll end up working, looking at sites, analysing them, doing my sort of due diligence on there, looking at planning portals and so on. So I was constantly sort of working, but I was sort of burning the candle at both ends. But it was only literally when it came down to childcare, I'm like, well, the inflexibility of being employed.
Yeah.
And that was where the issue was for me. But I'm glad it happened, and I wouldn't change it.
It's a thing of the past now, and I think it shows that if you really want something, you'll find a way of getting it. There's a massive thing, which is a topic about going into business with close friends or family. Don't mix business with family or close friends. In the grand scheme of things, you've known Sanjay since you're the age of 11.
That's right.
What advice would you give to people that have close friends or are considering going into business with them?
I think you need to share the same vision. You don't need to have the same skill set, but you need to share the same vision. And that vision, is what's going to drive you to meet your goals. And not everyone will get on. We've, through the years, tried to venture with some other people, and it hasn't worked out, because it's about the amount of hard work that you're going to put in. It's not just about, the aim is to make X amount of money. You have to put the time in, and some people don't have that same drive. So I don't think it's that straightforward, but it is doable. And, you see many successful friends and family working together.
The events, Rolls Royce, the clothes.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy more now, the fruits of your labour or the deals?
I'll be honest, look, I'm actually quite an introvert because I was obviously in a sort of a tech role when I was backstage. Obviously, once we started Savoys, we ended up winning an award and our picture got out there, and then I've had to sort of embrace and become comfortable speaking like this. So for me, all of this is new and it's exciting, and it is actually really enjoyable because myself and Sanjay are two kids from Southall, and you don't really get to where we are from there. So whether it's Rolls Royce or we've collaborated with Watches of Switzerland twice, their flagship Knightsbridge store. It's something that's surreal. So always sit back the next day. I'm like, I can't believe we did this.
Even now, you're still almost pinching yourself.
Yeah, well, it's all the time because we have lenders that say, okay, so maybe the MD or some of the directors want to take you out for lunch and dinner, and showing that respect to us, and it's quite humbling for us because obviously where we've come from, and what you'll probably see, I don't know if you've seen, but we're probably one of the only few developers with our own financial products. So with Octane, we've got an exclusive lending business set up with them where we've called it the Game Changer. We're collaborating with Shawbrook for our next event. Glen Hawk are in talks with us, and we're meeting them in the next few weeks. So for us, it's surreal because I didn't think any of this was going to be possible when we bought our first property back in 2001.
I can imagine. In the world of business, there's clearly a set of goals that you set yourselves. You might sit there on a weekly basis, a quarterly basis, an annual basis. How do you find the time to tick all these things off? Because by the looks of it, just from an outsider's perspective, you've got your fingers in loads of different pies. You're all over the place. How do you manage that?
We manage it by not managing it. There's no goals. So what we said is no limit. So nothing's off. Nothing's off the table. Someone said to us, so we met Terry Stone, and he goes, why don't you sponsor the Marbella Film Festival? He's got 2 films going in. Then we're like, okay, yeah, cool. So we did that back in 22. We're just literally anything. We'll try anything.
It's that yes attitude.
It's that yes attitude, and like, actually, do you know what? Why can't we do this? So obviously, we're looking for what we're actually doing is we're sponsoring, Watford Football Club. So we're for the last 3 seasons we've been sponsoring them. We've gone down to like grassroots football as well, where we've sponsored Denham Ladies FC. We've just recently agreed to sponsor Hayes and Harlington Football Club for the current season. A boxer, Dylan Chima, who's won the Boxer series on Sky Sports. So we sponsor him. And nothing's off the table. It's just like when something's approached, we just sit down. So actually, yeah, why not? I think we can do this. So it's just not to limit yourself.
Yeah. And what is the cost versus return ratio? I mean, you're putting yourselves out there. Clearly, you're not doing this for fun or for free. You're spending a lot of money.
So with Savoys, we haven't actually taken 1 penny out of it. So the money that we make through the various businesses that we have there, from the management side, we've got obviously our lending side, we've got the development side, and now we've got an educational bit. We've just reinvested that money back in. Myself and Sanjay actually make our money from purchasing our own sites and developing those. And what we've said is, rather than us trying to take dividends and like strangling this brand, let's let it breathe and see what occurs with it. So we've built our management team up. I think we're now around about 10 people within that, and we now manage 600 properties.
Wow.
Well, 600 tenants. And obviously we've got our lending side that we're pushing and building on, and in terms of developments, we're doing pretty well there with client builds on our own. So it's just allowing the business to breathe and see what can come out of it.
I suppose it's also that foundation that you set yourself early on in the years, by working 2 jobs and and having your own investments on the side, it has really allowed you to elevate the business to what it is today. And if you don't mind me saying, I think it looks like it's been an overnight success, but it's been in the making for many, many years. I watched something recently which was Savoys Properties has only been running since 2020.
That's right. So,
but on the outside, it looks like it's been running for 20 years.
So what we did was, with Savoys, we always wanted to create this brand. So we actually registered the company, I think, back in 2013. But at that point, we had two other business partners. Again, when we mentioned that we thought they shared the same vision.
Yeah.
So that business at that time, we set it up. It was just with Company's House. I think we just set up a bank account for it. And we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And one of the business partners then turns around, well, you need to pay me X amount of salary. I'm like, well, we're not generating anything. I'm going to work. So you want me to go to work, earn my money to give it to you, and you haven't brought in anything. I'm like, that's not how it works. So we dwindled down to 3 and then just down to 2 with me and Sanjay. But obviously, as we were working full time and we were doing our property development stuff, we didn't have time to actually pursue this. So what we said was, when we give up work, both of us will go down this route. So back in 2019, we said, okay, do you know what? 1st of April 2020, let's go with this. So with all the properties that were with various agents and so on, we've just said, okay, move these all in. So we gave them notices, and this was all going to happen. But then obviously 23rd of March 2020, we went into a lockdown. When both myself and Sanjay like, what have we done? But somehow we made it work. We're like, okay, again, it's that consistency, hard work, not giving up, like just go for it. And one of the benefits of when we went into lockdown is we had nothing but time. All the distractions were gone. So we just started pushing with it. And both myself and Sanjay don't have marketing experience or anything, but everything was all self-learned. And on that 1st of April 2020, it was just myself and Sanjay within the business. And then we slowly started bringing people in as we've been growing. So, but from the outset, it does look like an overnight success.
Yeah, and I think you've got to give yourselves credit. The no marketing experience, the marketing that you put out there is very watchable, and I think that's why people love you guys. It's very authentic. It's just you being yourselves. It's not staged.
No, it's us. And what we wanted to do was go in the opposite direction of everybody within the industry, because I've been watching what people say and so on social media from the Facebook days before there was even Instagram, and the overhyping of numbers, the flashy cars, and all of that. I'm like, so when we decided to come out and say, okay, let's go the complete opposite direction, rather than going with the flow, this is what you do, and then you start pushing your course and all the mentoring and so on. Let's go in the complete opposite direction. Don't push anything. Just show what you're doing, because majority of the ones that are considered gurus and ones that are mentoring, you don't really even see them doing any projects or anything. So if you have a look at our stuff and you go back now since we started posting on socials as Savoys, you'll see that we'll always show that this is a site. You can see the progress of that over 6 months of probably every site from the start, from getting the keys and just saying this is what we're going to do to when it's actually finished. And no one else can actually do that, because most of the stuff on socials, in my opinion, is fabricated.
You learnt your bread and butter in single lets, HMOs, and then ventured into the world of property development. Naturally, I'm assuming you dabble in both still, when a deal's a deal, regardless. How different are the two worlds?
So buy-to-let is something that you can actually do quite easily for working a 9 to 5. So we were always looking for a strategy, and there wasn't enough information around as there is now. But we started looking into HMOs sort of the late 2000s, and in 2010 we ended like, okay, let's actually venture into it. But how do we do it? So I'm like, well, why don't we just buy one ready-made and then learn from all the mistakes within it, and then when we start building our own, we know how we should have it. So we purchased a house through auction as a 5-bed ensuite HMO. It was let to DSS, and it was a nightmare to manage. We're like, okay, look, so we don't really want to manage social housing because it's quite difficult.
It's exactly what you wanted to experience, though, really.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to experience. Okay, look, we don't want to have that. Look, we've got someone puts in a faulty toaster, all the circuits trip in the house, and so when we then bought another property to convert to a HMO. We like put all of that in, and one thing that we saw back in 2010 was people were catering for social housing and student let for HMOs, but the private rented sector professionals was a really neglected market. And where we were, rents for a studio were close to £1,000 per month. The average graduate coming out would have been at that time around 20 to 25k. You know, they wouldn't really be able to afford to go into a studio flat and live, because that would be all their salary all sort of gone. So we saw that was a missing sort of jigsaw puzzle there, and we went into that, and that was before even spareroom.co.uk was around. And since then we haven't looked back. But then that was producing really good cash flow, but we wanted to venture into something that will give you a big one-off return. And 2013, prior approval was announced to convert offices to residential. We ended up purchasing our first office for 330k. I think we spent around about 120k on it, and it got valued at £1 million after we refinanced at 75%, and we all had a nice sort of cash lump sum, and then we went again. So we've been pursuing that commercial to residential for 10 years, and we still do the HMO stuff now.
In the world of sport, you know, these competitions, you know, reaching these titles and these accolades, there's reaching that, and then there's almost the downfall of that particular individual for loads of different reasons. You know, they set their sights assuming that when they get to that particular summit, they're going to be happy. I've heard you speak about it quite often, which is enjoying the process and the experiences, and not thinking of, oh, when I get that or the next thing thereafter.
Yeah, I think in life you have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to enjoy that whole process. One thing about myself and Sanjay, we're both from migrant families, so our parents are from Punjab, which is in India. You know, they came over, well, our grandparents came over initially, and, you know, from what they tell us and from what our parents tell us and from what we witnessed growing up, you know, it's quite a poor sort of background. So we don't really want to be out there sort of gloating, look at us, look at us. So that's that humble aspect. But as we're achieving success, it's always to remain grateful. And, you know, it's extremely important to give back. Just an example, this year we teamed up with Khalsa Aid. So when the earthquakes happened in Turkey, both myself and Sanjay actually flew out to Turkey, about 10 hours away from where the epicenter of the earthquake was. We basically contributed to purchasing blankets, clothing, you know, steel plates, pots and pans and stuff, because these families had lost everything, filled up 2 truckloads, and which was delivered over there. And then just a few months ago, the same families that are out in these campsites don't have any running water, so we actually purchased 10,000 5-litre bottles of water, and that was also distributed. So, you know, there's a keen point of, like, if you're getting that success, you have to sort of remain humble and always just sort of give back. It's not about, and we don't film it and put it out there. The only bits that we put out is the aid agency has sent us, as you can share this on your socials. It's not us like handing something out to someone and filming us to say, look how great we are.
Well, we were speaking off camera, Malkit, and we were talking about how you guys never push any products. It's not a case of this is what we're selling. You know, buy into us. For you, it's clearly just documenting the journey, documenting the process.
Yeah, it's for us that's how we actually started doing socials, was just saying that this is our development and so on. And both myself and Sanjay are very different from most of the individuals that are on social media, whereas they have to sell something to survive, because majority of them are probably faking what they're doing. Some of them I looked into, and, you know, their companies are dormant, they haven't filed any returns, but they're driving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. And that may not even be theirs. And, you know, there's some other individuals that claim to be a millionaire and don't even have any trading companies in their name. You know, it's just surreal. So, for us, it's about just showing who we are and then inspiring other individuals. Because as we've been doing this social media journey for us, we've ended up having individuals that have approached us on the streets or when we've done our events, saying it's really inspiring. It's nice to see someone from the same background as us doing this, and it's nice to see someone that's not out there just driving around in a flash car saying I'm financially free. So that is where we sort of come from. But we've noticed that there is a need for like good quality education. So what we've done is we've set something up which is low in monetary value but high in terms of knowledge. So we've started our Savoys education side, and we're not pushing it hard, but it's like the people that have been contacting us saying, I really want to learn from you, I want you to mentor us. We don't do mentoring, but we'll help on the education side where we're explaining this is how we've done this is what we go through, this is how our sort of checklist, this is what you need to know, and then collaborate with other companies that are respected within the industry, such as Octane Capital, Allsop, Ronald Fletcher Baker, LLP, and CPC Finance. We'll bring all these people in and provide that good knowledge to the people out there.
And there's nothing wrong with education. I think there's a misconception. There's nothing wrong with the education industry as such, but it's knowing that you're going to get what you pay for from people that have walked that path. So absolutely, I think there's certainly a need for these types of things, which is speaking to people like you, because I can only imagine people knocking on your door, and you need to, at some point, your time is money. And if there's an opportunity to monetize your time, then so be it. I think that's fair game.
No, true. But for us, there's three things that we haven't done. One is mentoring anyone for money. We've mentored people that are part of our team and so on, or friends or family that we know, but we never charge any money for mentoring. We've never done a joint venture with investors, and we never borrowed money from investors. There's three things that we've done, and I don't think there's many people within the industry that are on social media, especially, that can actually say that.
I think when you look back at it, Malkit, ultimately you can give someone a list, literally a step-by-step guide of how to do things, how to develop property. But when you strip it all back, it's years of consistency, it's graft, it's stress, it's highs, it's lows. So you can stand in a room with 1,000 people, and maybe 10% of those people will actually put into practice what you've gone and said. And I think, too often in our world, people see the fruits of your labor and think, right, I just want to get to the point of your success. It's almost like a Deliveroo element of success, but it doesn't exist.
No. To be honest, if you're going to go into property, it's not an overnight success. Regardless of what strategy and so on that you go into, you have to put the time in. At least look at it bare minimum as a 5-year.
There's no quick trick. There's no shortcuts.
I don't think so. And I know there's people on socials that say, look, I did this, and within 3 months I'm financially free and I'm making 10K a month and so on. To me, I don't really see that happening, and it's unfortunate. This is where everyone's sort of heading down, because someone's saying they're making this much, the other person comes out and the other person comes out. I don't see it that way. I think you just have to put the time in, and as you go through, it becomes a lot easier. So if you do something illegitimate at the start, it's so easy, but it gets harder over time. If you do something legal and the right way, it's harder at the start, but over time it gets easier. So for us, being in the industry for over 20 years, you'll get a phone call from an agent, auctioneer, and so on. I've got this. I think this is really good for you. It's right down your street. And then I can then see an angle on it, and I may be able to secure a deal saying, well, we've got these guys, we've been working with them for over 10 years, 20 years, or so on. And, they'll 100% complete within this 4-week time period, and so on. So this is how it gets easier to get a deal done. So
I want to pick up something you just said there, which is if I can see an angle, which leads me on to something I really wanted to understand. Sure. Understanding the rules of the game. Where someone can see a deal, you guys see things differently. Where does that come from? Is that, again, experience? Is that more the team around you?
So it actually comes from Tupac.
You say Tupac?
Tupac, yeah. So in, I think it was like 97, I heard this song called Staring at My Life from a Rear View. And at the end of the song, he basically says, look, life's a game. You understand the rules of the game, it's yours to be played. And I'm quite analytical. I'm like, actually, do you know what? That's actually so true. So, for example, I was never really good. I was not really that bright. But I remember going into school, and this is for secondary school, and we had like a spelling test where they'd work out where they're going to put you into classes and stuff. And someone said, "Can you write pink?" And I was like, P-I-C-K. So I was at that stage, but I've gone on to, pass my GCSEs to get a degree, and I got a master's as well.
Wow.
So I understand, okay, this is what you need to do. Like, you need to pick these various elements up and you'll be able to succeed. So when we went into the property side, again, understanding the HMO stuff, well, where is my time being taken up? Let's make someone's losing their keys, I'm getting a phone call, so let's make it keyless. So it was easy. So we use mechanical punch lock. So I'm always looking at how we can improve. Where we actually surpassed a lot of people were when we actually look at the planning side of it. We see bits where other people can't. So I remember, and this is back in 2019, we went to have a look at a site. It was a defunct office, and I was walking around and someone was saying, "Oh, do you know what, you only can get 5 flats in this, it's not really worth it." I'm like, these guys are missing a massive trick. We ended up purchasing this site for 670k. We spent $500,000 on it, including fees, interest, and the build costs, and we got 10 flats. And before we even purchased it was valued at 2.25. Once we completed it, coming out of lockdown, it was worth 2.5 million. We made over 7 figures off that one deal. And that was us understanding the rules of the prior approval process, what we could do with it, what we couldn't. And we did it in a staged way, so there was 3 planning applications. So we knew if they allowed the first planning application, they don't say anything about parking. So when we put in the application later for 10, they won't be able to say anything. It was okay there. You didn't mention anything about parking. So it's just knowing how to do things. And that's where, we've done exceptionally well. And I'll give you another example is, in 2021, we went to purchase this commercial with uppers, and the idea was the uppers were going to change to a HMO. But we walked around this site. This was in Denham, and there was this large sort of detached garage there, and it was a really bad state. I looked at it. I'm like, okay, who owns this? Oh, the vendor does, but it's not included in the sale. Okay, and he says, no, not really worth it. If you're only going to get £100, £150 a month for it. I'm like, okay, cool. Why don't you give me that? I'll pay the asking price, but give me this for free. And then understanding a loophole within planning, I ended up getting planning to convert that to a 3-bed Muse house. So that piece of land was free. I spent 40k on it. 6 months later, it was revalued at 400k. So it's just understanding that. And so every time I look at anything, whether it's property or any element of what we're doing, I'm just like, okay, where can I add value? Where's the loophole with this? Where's our angle?
It's also not listening to the naysayers. 2 occasions that you've got someone saying, "Oh, you're only going to get 5 flats." The next person saying, "Oh, that garage isn't worth anything." You've just gone with what you believe is right, and it's paid off every single time.
Over 20 years in property, I've had planning enforcement always get involved, because when you're doing HMOs, they're all en suite, and you've got like cooking facilities. No, you haven't got cooking facilities, but you've got little kitchenettes without cooking facilities within there. And when I initially started doing that, they said, "Well, this is a grey area. You can't have those in there. That's it, to us, because you've got a sink in the room that's considered self-contained." I'm like, no, it's not. And I then had to do research on the net, find out case laws and so on. So then I built up this sort of 2-page letter. So each time, various councils where I'd make a HMO, and they'll say, "Oh, you put an intercom in, but that makes it self-contained." I'm like, no, it doesn't. Here's this, and this case under this, and Lewisham Council versus so-and-so, and this was deemed this by the planning inspectorate and so on. So I'll put this all together. So I always look into everything, just spend that time.
Again, it's not conceding. It's not taking no as the first answer.
No, you should never. I never take the first response. And even when I work with our planning and architects and so on, I'm like, no, you should be able to do this. No, I don't think you can. No, you can. We can include the undercroft into this building, a part of the planning application. No, you can't. No, you can, because under this it says the whole fabric of the building, and that is the fabric of the building. So I'm then sort of educating some of the planning guys that I'm working with. It's only because I've looked into it a lot more detail.
It's the time that you're willing to spend on something.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of thousands of investors. There are tens of thousands of developers, if not more. Not all are profitable. What guidelines do Savoys Properties use that you could share as tips to enable people to sort of follow those tracks? Not giving away too much or too many of your secrets.
I think basically is not every deal is a deal. So, you really make your money when you purchase a property. So if you buy it at the right price, there's always going to be uplift on it. I've had some people that say, I bought this house for 700 grand, I'm going to change it to a 6-bed HMO. I'm like, well, you've overpaid for it already. The whole purpose of the HMOs, most people tend to buy housing stock, which is at the lower end, and then obviously you try to get 6 rooms in it, and they use a commercial valuation on this. So it's understanding the numbers. You need to understand, obviously, the planning process is actually very key. You need to build up a power team. So, in terms of a broker, I think is probably the most essential person, because they actually see people that are actually doing really well within the industry, and they can say, well, we've got a client and he's just done this, and like, oh, okay, wow, let me have a look into that. Okay, yeah, that's a sort of angle we may want to sort of go down in the future. Having the right solicitor, because if you're purchasing something in an auction, if they miss something, it can be very costly. Working with lenders, so we've been quite loyal with the people that we're working with in general. Like Shawbrook Bank, we've been with them since we started our first sort of HMO back in 2010. Having all these power team will enable you to sort of push forward. And I think the most important aspect is the loyalty bit, because I see people just jumping brokers, jumping lenders and so on. But then what ends up happening is people lose that element of respect and that trust. So for example, for us, we've been with Ronald Fletcher Baker, our solicitors, for in excess of 10 years. We've been with CPC Finance for 13 years. We've been with Shawbrook Bank, the same period of time, 13 years. I'm actually going to be married now 20 years. It's just that loyalty thing, just staying with the people and having faith in them. And if something doesn't go right, you don't just jump ship. You just have a meeting with them, say, well, this didn't go right. Look, if we don't get this sorted, I'm going to have to go somewhere else. Because you don't, like with agents, if you're using an estate agent or letting agent, you don't move because someone else now has opened up a company is offering 1% less.
Agreed. Really, in essence, the guidelines are, of course, experience, of course, consistency, dedication into your craft, but it's also having the right people around you. So having the right people around you can get you to those positions where you are making a success of a deal, where you may not know everything, because it's very rare that people do know everything all the time. I think we're all students to a certain extent.
To be honest, you don't really need to know everything, so that's a misconception within it. You just need to have faith in the team that you have around with you. So I don't really look up financial products or anything anymore. I did when I initially started, but I'll be like, I've gone on this website and this is the best deal. Now for me, when I've moved across to Carl, I just said I need the best deal, but at the quickest time, because I understand I may get a better deal with
time is money in your world.
Yeah. So Paragon may do something, but they got massive delays in something, but I need to recycle that money, because if I can take that back out really quickly, I can then go again and buy another property in that same period. So it's having that trust in the people that you work with.
What part of the process do you love most? The negotiation, solving the problems, the deal, cashing the money in the bank? What is it that gives you the most thrill?
I'll be honest, I only like 2 parts of the whole property process. I like the purchasing of it, so working out that angle, okay, we can do this with it. And once it's finished, I don't really like that bit in the middle. It can be stressful because you're literally just trying to solve problems, and the people that you employ to, say, build the property and so on, they just keep phoning you with issues. And then I have to resolve their problems. Whereas I would prefer if they phone me, say, oh, I've got this issue, but I've resolved it by doing X.
True. That is true.
So I'm always have to say, well, okay, so I've got an issue on a site with drainage. I'm like, okay, well, why can't we do this? Okay, yeah, I didn't think of that. I'm like, yeah, you guys are the builders and so on. But it is literally this, that. And, we never panic, so you always have to stay calm. And there's always a solution to a problem.
I love that. How long the deals typically take from seeing or receiving an opportunity to then executing the deal and seeing it through?
So our strategy has always been trying to turn the property project around in 6 months.
Okay.
Because I don't really, we do some new build stuff, but I don't really, what I've learned over the past 20 years is if you're doing new builds, typically it's about 18 months. Whereas the stuff that we do is we turn it around within 6 months. We already know what our exit value is going to be with the lenders that we're working with.
Okay.
And within 6 months, you know that the market may change, but it's not going to dramatically change as what could happen in 18 months.
You need money to get into this business. You know, plain and simple, black and white. It's not, again, there's no loopholes involved. But
Yep.
when you're involved with these lenders, you hear of things, be it that lenders give you facilities, they throw money at you once you've established yourself. Is that true?
Yes and no. So if you basically build up a big portfolio, they could potentially give you a facility across all your portfolio. So if you're leveraged, for example, at 60%, they could say, well, you know, if you find something else, we can, without you having to take a charge on that new property, we could leverage you up to 65, 70, 75%. But they don't actually throw money at you. It's the people that I speak to within the industry that have been in it for a while. You know, some of them have quarterly reviews on their facility. So they have to pay for a valuation of their site. And if they value it down or up, you then need to pay the difference in money back. Right. Yeah, so I had someone I was speaking to on the weekend that mentioned that. She goes, oh, they downvalued a few of my properties and I had to pay 56K.
And this is where it starts to sort of strangle people and the stress levels increase.
Exactly. So it's not as straightforward as people make out.
Being a Watford FC business partner, now you're both Liverpool fans, so that must have hurt you a little bit. But where did this come about from?
So basically, I think it was both myself and Sanjay have got sons that are similar in age. I think there's about a year or two difference between the two. We're both passionate about football, but one thing I noticed within football, there's not many people that look like us representing in the sport. And we ended up saying, well, why don't we get involved with football? So Watford got promoted to the Premier League, and we basically approached them saying, okay, can we do some sort of collaboration here? And they're quite a nice family club. You know, we ended up agreeing a sponsorship deal with them, so as an official business partner, and it's been really good. So it's nice to feel that affiliation with the club. So we then basically use the hospitality that we have there to give to friends, family, some of the people that we work with, lenders, whoever, throughout the season. And it was literally just to show that, you know, to our kids that anything is possible. So we've had, like last season, it was a game, Watford versus Norwich City at home. It was live on Sky Sports. Both our kids were mascots on the day, so they came out on the pitch, and you know they got to experience that. So it's basically trying to give them an experience and
memories they'll never forget.
Yeah, and just trying to encourage them like nothing's off limits.
Breaking down some numbers, Malkit, I think listeners are always keen to get an idea of, you hear it again, numbers flagged around, and for someone who does it day in, day out and works with the numbers, you hear of developers that work on a third, in theory. If you were to break down the numbers on how developments work, be it, what you spend, what you put in, what you typically get out, can you give us an insight into that a little bit more?
Well, I think it goes case by case in terms of the property that it is. Typically, what we try to do is double the value of a property if we're doing a commercial site. If it's a HMO, then you have to work out, are you buying at the right price, the works that you're going to do, and what your exit's going to be. So to give you an example, we're doing a site in Maidenhead. We've purchased that for 400K. I think we're spending about 100 on it, just chopping the retail into a retail unit and a self-contained flat. And the uppers, I think we're changing that to a 4-bed HMO. And our build cost on that is, say, 120, and we've already agreed an exit at 800k, and then whatever the interest and stuff will be, your broker will be able to tell you that, but then you sort of factor that in. Ideally for us, we want to go into a deal and be able to pull all our money back out and recycle it.
Fine.
So it's just we try to find that angle where if we refinance that at 75%, we'll be able to pull our monies out and we go again. But then once we have that site, we never really go back and try to pull money out of it again. We let the housing capital appreciation and inflation sort of take off, and then over time, then that will become more down to 60% LTV.
An option which is you're only allowed to choose one strategy for the remainder of your property journey. What would it be?
Well, we've been in HMOs for a long time. We've got a lot of properties and tenants. So I would probably stick with commercial to residential.
Okay.
Because it's actually, for us, it's actually nice to see how we can impact an area. So if you see where our office is, we ended up purchasing that site. It was destined to be knocked down.
Okay.
There's six commercial units and 3 duplex flats. But obviously with the housing material prices rising, labor prices rising, it wasn't feasible. So what we did on this site, we purchased it, we repopulated it with retail units, small independent businesses. We obviously put our own business in there, changed the uppers to 16-bed, all-ensuite HMO. And now it's quite a vibrant place, and it's nice to see people coming to the tailor, to the barber. It's got a ladies' beautician there, and now just on the weekend, we opened up the last 2 units as a furniture flooring showroom.
Okay.
We're now producing loads of free information through our Savoys education platform. Mm-hmm. So we're posting some tips and stuff every day. We're going to be putting some YouTube videos and stuff out as well, just so people can see projects and so on. But it's literally using the free platforms out there. But then don't be afraid to spend on your education and stuff as well.
Look, I thoroughly enjoy the content that you put out there, and one of the things that I always want to grasp from any guest is the best advice that they remember being given. What's stuck with you, Malkit, that's helped you, other than Tupac, of course, throughout your business journey?
There's been loads, but life without risk is a risk itself. And I saw this on a bumper sticker, probably mid-90s. And I'm quite a risk-reverse guy. So when I now look at something, I'm like, I calculate the risk on it. I'm like, okay, this is feasible. But yeah, don't be afraid to take a risk, and don't be afraid to lose. Just because you lose doesn't mean you lost.
Yeah.
So I treat all the losses that I had, I just treat those as education. And once you then switch your mind to think like this, it's you'll be unstoppable.
Spins it into a positive. Well, look, you can, for the viewers that have kindly watched up until this point, you can find all the information on Savoys Properties in the description box. Their education course that they've launched or are launching is well worth finding more about, because if you're looking to latch on to something that has been tried, tested, and proven, these guys are certainly your contacts. Malkit, thoroughly enjoyed today. Appreciate the time you spent, and all the very best for the future.
Thank you.